It was the darker side of the relationship, and only later did she ultimately open up for her fans and the media. Did she reveal who was the third party too? We'll find that out in a while. An untimely end. Sandra had married actor Bobby Darin in 1960, a couple who seemed like a match made in movie star heaven. They were young, talented, and glowing with the kind of star power that made people root for them. For a while, everything looked rosy, but as time went on, cracks began to show. The pressures of fame, long separations due to work, and personal struggles started to weigh heavily on their relationship. It wasn't an easy life behind the glamour. The turning point came when Sandra revealed, in a rare and candid moment, that Bobby had been unfaithful. The affair wasn't just a simple slip-up. It was a secret that festered, hidden beneath layers of denial and heartbreak. For Sandra, this wasn't just about betrayal. It was a moment that shattered her sense of trust and security. The pain of discovering that the person she loved was involved with someone else was devastating. It wasn't easy for her to talk about it publicly, but when she did, it brought a wave of sympathy and understanding from fans who had only ever seen her as the innocent ingenue. One question that's always popped up is, who was the other woman? We know Bobby cheated, but the identity of the third party has been a topic of speculation and curiosity for decades. So, who exactly was she? The woman most often linked to Bobby Darin's affair was a socialite named Susan Cabot. Susan was an actress herself, though not as famous as Sandra or Bobby. The two moved in similar Hollywood circles, and their paths crossed often enough to spark rumors. It's said that Bobby got involved with Susan during a rough patch in his marriage to Sandra. What started as casual meetings allegedly turned into something more serious behind the scenes. But here's the thing. Hollywood gossip is tricky. Some sources say Susan was indeed the other woman, while others suggest it might have been someone else entirely. There were whispers about Bobby having multiple flings during his career, not just the one with Susan. Some believe the affair that hurt Sandra the most might have been with a different actress or socialite who kept things under the radar. Sandra herself was pretty private about naming names. When she eventually spoke about the affair, she focused more on the emotional impact rather than the details of who exactly was involved. It was clear that the betrayal cut deep, but she didn't want to add fuel to the gossip fire by publicly calling out the third party. What makes this story so interesting is how the media and fans pieced it together over the years. In a way, the mystery of the other woman became part of the narrative of their marriage's downfall. It's a classic Hollywood tale, a famous couple, a scandalous affair, and the heartbreaking fallout. Whether it was Susan Cabot or someone else, the identity of the third party seems almost secondary to the bigger story. Bobby's betrayal and the way it affected Sandra Dee. The affair wasn't just about cheating. It symbolized the struggles and strains of trying to hold a relationship together in the spotlight. Her revelation wasn't just gossip fodder, it was a glimpse into the complex reality many couples face, especially under the relentless scrutiny of fame. Sandra talked about the emotional toll it took on her, the nights filled with tears, the questioning of her self-worth, and the struggle to decide whether to fight for the marriage or walk away. The affair became a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, but also a catalyst for her own journey toward healing and self-discovery. In fact, Sandra's openness about the affair helped to humanize her in the eyes of the public. She wasn't just a starlet or a character in a movie. She was a woman who had loved deeply and suffered greatly. Her story reminded people that even in the brightest spotlight, the shadows of pain and betrayal can still loom large. It also sparked conversations about the pressures on Hollywood marriages and how difficult it can be to maintain love amidst the chaos of stardom. Sandra Dee's decision to speak out about the affair wasn't just about clearing the air, it was about reclaiming her narrative. It was her way of saying that, yes, she had been hurt, but she was still standing. Her courage to share her truth made her story resonate far beyond the silver screen, connecting with anyone who has ever faced heartbreak and found the strength to move forward. After Bobby, Sandra's romantic life became quieter. She eventually remarried. Do you think she experienced the same fate? Nope, it was a complete opposite. Her calm after the storm, nestled quietly in the golden era of film, is the sweet and enduring love story of Sandra Dee and Alan Elliott, a tale that might not have made the loudest headlines, but is just as heartfelt and genuine. Sandra Dee was one of the most iconic actresses of the late 50s and early 60s. Known for her girl-next-door charm, sparkling smile, and innocent appeal, she starred in beloved movies like Gidget and A Summer Place. She was the embodiment of wholesome American youth during a time when Hollywood was shifting from classic glamour to a more modern, relatable style. Alan Elliott was an actor too, though not nearly as famous as Sandra. He was more the quiet, steady kind of guy who loved Sandra for who she was, not just her Hollywood persona. They met in the early 60s at a time when Sandra was at the peak of her career, but also struggling with the pressures that came with sudden fame and a very public image. Their connection wasn't the kind of whirlwind Hollywood romance that made tabloid headlines. Instead, it was marked by simple moments and steady companionship. Alan was there during times when Sandra needed grounding, offering support as she navigated the ups and downs of showbiz life. Unlike many celebrity couples whose relationships burned out quickly under the spotlight, Sandra and Alan's relationship endured because it was built on friendship and mutual respect. One of the things that made their love story special was how Alan stayed out of the spotlight. He wasn't interested in chasing fame or publicity. That calm presence allowed Sandra to feel safe and loved for who she truly was, beyond the silver screen. They shared laughs, quiet evenings, and moments away from Hollywood's glare. It's the kind of relationship many people dream of, a real partnership. Their love also had its challenges. Sandra faced health struggles and personal difficulties, including battles with self-esteem and the darker sides of Hollywood fame. Through those times, Alan was a steadfast anchor. He helped her focus on the important things in life beyond the camera: family, friends, and simple joys. Sadly, Sandra Dee passed away in 2005, but the love she shared with Alan Elliott remains part of her story, one of tenderness, support, and genuine affection. Sandra was adored in her life. Chances are you've heard of Sandra Dee if you grew up watching classic movies or listening to stories about Hollywood's golden era. She was one of those rare stars whose appeal wasn't just about her looks or talent. It was something deeper, something that connected with people on a genuine, heartfelt level. So why was Sandra Dee so loved? First off, Sandra Dee had this unforgettable girl next door vibe. Back in the 50s and 60s, Hollywood was full of glamorous, often untouchable stars with bigger-than-life personalities and complicated public images. Sandra, on the other hand, felt approachable. She was the sweet, wholesome, innocent girl who seemed like she could be your best friend, or the girl you admired quietly from afar. Her smile was warm and genuine, and there was a softness in her eyes that made audiences believe she was the embodiment of youthful purity. In movies like Gidget or A Summer Place, she played characters that were relatable and full of hope, love, and vulnerability. People weren't just watching a pretty face. They were watching someone who seemed real, someone they could root for. Sandra's rise to fame coincided with a time when America was yearning for innocence and stability after World War II. The 50s were a time of change, but also of yearning for simple values: family, love, decency. Sandra Dee became a symbol of that ideal. Her roles often reflected traditional values and the joys and pains of growing up. In a way, she was a cultural touchstone for a generation of young people who were figuring out who they were in a rapidly changing world. Characters dealt with first loves, heartbreaks, and moral questions in a way that resonated deeply. People loved her because she represented a kind of hopefulness. She was the good girl everyone wanted to see succeed, fall in love, and find happiness. Sure, Sandra Dee was beautiful, but her appeal wasn't just skin deep. She was a talented actress who could bring warmth, innocence, and even a bit of humor to her roles. She could make you laugh in Gidget and cry in A Summer Place. Her ability to portray complex emotions in a natural, understated way was part of what made her so beloved. You didn't get the feeling she was acting in the over-the-top way some stars sometimes do. Instead, it felt like you were glimpsing a real person's feelings and struggles, and that authenticity struck a chord with audiences. Sandra's story wasn't all sunshine and roses. Off-screen, she faced a lot of challenges, from health issues to the pressures of early fame. But this vulnerability only made her more relatable to her fans. Many people saw themselves in Sandra's struggles, trying to live up to expectations, coping with insecurities, and dealing with personal hardships. She wasn't a flawless celebrity. She was human, and that made her easier to love. Her openness about her difficulties, especially later in life, helped people connect with her on a deeper level. She wasn't just a star. She was someone who had faced real battles and kept going. Even decades after her heyday, Sandra Dee's name still brings smiles. For many, she's a nostalgic icon of a simpler time. Her movies remind people of their youth, family movie nights, or the first crushes and awkward moments of growing up. There's something comforting in that kind of nostalgia. Sandra Dee's image and roles evoke memories of innocence and hope, which people cherish, especially as the world becomes more complicated. Sandra Dee's impact wasn't limited to the screen. She inspired a whole generation of young women to embrace their authentic selves. She showed that you didn't have to be loud or flashy to be noticed. You could be gentle, kind, and still leave a lasting mark. Her legacy includes not just her films, but the way she made people feel seen and understood. Whether it was through her roles or her off-screen grace, Sandra Dee created a sense of warmth and belonging. But while many adored her for playing the all-American wholesome girl next door, some critics felt that this image boxed her in, limiting her artistic range and ultimately doing her a disservice as an actress. One of the biggest critiques was that Sandra Dee was heavily typecast. For much of her career, she was cast in similar roles, the innocent, pure-hearted teenager or young woman. Movies like Gidget and A Summer Place capitalized on her youthful, virginal persona. But this typecasting meant she rarely got a chance to stretch her acting skills or show more complexity. Critics argued that she was trapped in a bubble of sweetness, playing characters that didn't challenge her or the audience. This typecasting trap is something many young actors face, but in Sandra's case, it was especially limiting because her public image became so closely tied to these idealized roles. It wasn't until later that people started to wonder what she might have done with more varied, mature roles. Adding to this criticism was the way Hollywood and the studio system constructed and controlled her image. Sandra Dee was marketed as the perfect girl, almost a symbol of wholesome Americana, during a time when the industry loved to sell fantasy versions of young women. But this created a disconnect between the public's perception and her real life. Behind the scenes, Sandra struggled with insecurities, personal issues, and addiction, but clashed with the polished persona that studios carefully maintained. Some argue that this pressure to live up to an impossible ideal may have contributed to her emotional struggles later on. It's a classic Hollywood story, the glamorous, perfect exterior hiding a more complicated and painful reality. Her marriage to singer Bobby Darin added another layer to the public's fascination with Sandra Dee, and not always in a positive way. At first, they were seen as a golden couple, the perfect match of two young, talented stars. But as time went on, their relationship became more complicated and was subject to intense media scrutiny. Rumors and reports of troubles including issues linked to Sandra's health and addiction, fed gossip columns. Their marriage, which ended in divorce, didn't fit the fairy tale narrative many fans wanted to believe. This kind of public relationship drama was a common Hollywood trope. But for Sandra, it also meant her personal struggles were often played out in the tabloids, adding stress and publicity she probably didn't want. Beyond personal controversies, Sandra Dee's career has also been examined through a broader cultural lens. Many modern viewers and critics look back at the kinds of roles she played and see them as reflections of the narrow and sometimes problematic portrayals of women in the 50s and 60s. Her characters often embodied a very limited idea of femininity, innocent, pure, compliant, and tied to traditional values. This was typical of the era's films, but today it can feel restrictive or even regressive. Some critics point out that Sandra's films didn't challenge the status quo or explore the complexities of female identity. They reinforced an ideal that doesn't fully resonate with contemporary audiences. This criticism isn't necessarily about Sandra personally, but about the system she was part of and the roles she was given. Despite all these criticisms and controversies, Sandra Dee's story highlights the pressures young actresses faced in Hollywood's golden age. She was caught between the demands of the industry and her own personal challenges, trying to live up to a flawless image that wasn't realistic. Her struggles with addiction, her health issues, and the media scrutiny of her personal life all show how complicated it was to maintain stardom behind the scenes. Sandra Dee was loved because she was more than just a movie star. She was a symbol of innocence, a relatable human being, and a talented actress who connected with her audience's hopes, dreams, and vulnerabilities. Her girl-next-door charm, her authenticity, and her ability to represent a generation's ideals made her an unforgettable figure. People didn't just watch Sandra Dee, they loved her because she felt like someone they knew, someone they could trust, and someone who reminded them that sometimes the quiet, gentle voices leave the biggest impact. Life well lived. Dee was born Alexandra Zuck in Bayonne, New Jersey. She was the only child of John Zuck and Mary Zuck, who met as teenagers at a Russian Orthodox church dance. The couple married shortly afterward, but divorced before Dee was 5 years old. Dee was of Carpatho-Rusin descent and was raised in the Orthodox Christian faith. Her son, Bobby Darin, noted in his biography Dream Lovers that Dee's mother Mary and her aunt Olga were first-generation daughters of a working-class Russian Orthodox family. Dee herself remembered attending Russian Orthodox church events, which often included social dances. At an early age, Dee adopted the stage name Sandra Dee. By the time she was 4 years old, she was already working as a professional model and soon appeared in television commercials. While Dee's son's book states that she was born in 1944, Dee and her mother had intentionally added 2 years to her age to increase her chances of finding modeling and acting work at a young age. However, official documents, including her California divorce records from Bobby Darin, the Social Security Death Index, and her tombstone, all confirm her birth year as 1942. In a 1967 interview with the Oxnard Press Courier, Dee herself acknowledged being 18 years old in 1960, the year she first met Darin, whom she married 3 months later. After her parents' divorce in 1950, Dee's mother remarried in 1951 to Eugene Victor Duvon, a Russian immigrant born in 1898. Unfortunately, Duvon reportedly sexually abused Dee after marrying her mother. He died in 1956 at the age of 57 from heart-related issues after being transferred from New York City to Georgetown Hospital in Washington, D.C. Records from his citizenship application reveal he used several aliases, including Eugene George Stewart and Frederick von Bergner. At that time, he was living in Roosevelt, Nassau County, New York. Newspaper ads from the era show he sought construction and real estate work in Bayonne. Duvon had 2 sons from a previous marriage. One lived in Bayonne with him in the 50s, while the other lived in Chicago and Michigan. The beginning of a bright career, producer Ross Hunter claimed he discovered Dee on Park Avenue in New York City when she was just 12 years old, accompanied by her mother. In a 1959 interview, Dee reflected that she grew up fast, mostly surrounded by adults, and was never discouraged from pursuing her goals. During her modeling years, Dee struggled with weight loss, in an attempt to match the thinness of high-fashion models. Unfortunately, her extreme dieting harmed her skin, hair, nails, and overall health. After losing weight, her body had difficulty digesting food, and it took medical intervention for her to recover. Dee later said she could have killed herself and had to relearn how to eat properly. Despite the health challenges, she earned $75,000 in 1956, roughly $870,000 in 2024, supporting both herself and her mother after her stepfather's death that same year. Sources suggest her modeling earnings at that time were greater than what she would later make as an actress. While modeling in New York, Dee also attended the Professional Children's School. In 1957, Dee ended her modeling career and moved from New York to Hollywood. She graduated from University High School in Los Angeles in June 1958 at age 16. Her film debut came that same year in MGM's Until They Sail, directed by Robert Wise. To promote the film, Dee appeared in Modern Screen magazine, where Luella Parsons praised her talent and compared her to Shirley Temple. Her performance earned her the Golden Globe Award for New Star of the Year Actress. Dee was cast as the lead in The Reluctant Debutante, 1958, starring opposite John Saxon, her frequent romantic co-star in several films. She also provided the English voice of Gerda in The Snow Queen. However, the pressures of sudden fame combined with the trauma from earlier abuse led Dee to battle chronic anorexia nervosa, which caused temporary kidney failure. In 1958, Dee signed a contract with Universal Pictures, becoming one of the studio's last contract players before the end of the traditional studio system. She starred in The Restless Years, 1958, produced by Ross Hunter alongside John Saxon and Teresa Wright. This was followed by another Hunter production, A Stranger in My Arms. Dee's third film with Hunter, Imitation of Life, proved to be her breakthrough. Starring Lana Turner, the film was a huge box office success, grossing over $50 million and becoming Universal's highest-grossing film at the time. This success made Dee a household name. She was also loaned to Columbia Pictures for the teenage beach comedy Gidget, which was popular enough to inspire sequels, TV series, and movies, though Dee did not participate in those follow-ups. Universal cast Dee as a tomboy opposite Audie Murphy in The Wild and the Innocent, and Warner Brothers borrowed her for the melodrama A Summer Place, where she starred alongside Troy Donahue. The latter film was a major hit, and in 1959, American box office exhibitors ranked Dee as the 16th most popular star in the country. Hunter reunited Dee with Lana Turner and John Saxon in the thriller Portrait in Black, which was financially successful despite mixed reviews. By the end of 1960, Dee was ranked as the 7th most popular star nationally. In 1961, she starred in Romanoff and Juliet, a Cold War comedy directed by Peter Ustinov, alongside John Gavin, who had also appeared with her in Imitation of Life. Dee and Gavin worked together again in Hunter's Tammy Tell Me True, where Dee took over the Tammy role previously played by Debbie Reynolds. That same year, she appeared with Bobby Darin in Come September, marking his film debut after a cameo in an earlier movie. Dee and Darin married on December 1, 1960, and she gave birth to their son, Dodd Mitchell Darin, on December 16, 1961. In 1916, despite having 3 years left on her Universal contract, Dee signed a new 7-year deal. She starred with Darin in Hunter's romantic comedy, If a Man Answers. In 1963, Dee appeared in Tammy and the Doctor, the final film in the Tammy series, and the successful comedy Take Her, She's Mine, loosely inspired by Nora Ephron. That year, she was ranked the 8th most popular star, though it marked her last appearance in the top 10. Dee continued her film work with I'd Rather Be Rich, a musical remake of It Started with Eve, again produced by Hunter. She reunited with Darin in That Funny Feeling and appeared in her last Universal film, Under Contract, the spy comedy A Man Could Get Killed. In addition to acting, Dee also pursued singing in the early 60s, recording several singles, including a cover of When I Fall in Love. By the late 60s, Sandra Dee's career had noticeably slowed, and she was eventually dropped by Universal Pictures. Did she endure the turnaround? Career decline and later roles. Because of her divorce from Bobby, she appeared in very few films. In an interview that same year with Roger Ebert, Dee candidly spoke about her frustrations with the Hollywood studio system and the ingenue image that was imposed on her, which she found limiting. She recalled how the studios would interfere even with small personal choices like pulling cigarettes from her hand or covering her drink in photos, because the public image of little Sandra Dee wasn't supposed to include smoking, drinking, or even breathing. Dee appeared in Dr. You've Got to Be Kidding, which had moderate success. Producer Ross Hunter invited her back to Universal for a co-starring role in Rosie, but the film failed to make an impact. After that, she largely stepped away from film for a few years, until her 1970 role in The Dunwich Horror, an occult horror movie loosely based on an H.P. Lovecraft story. In it, she played a college student caught in the middle of an occult ritual. Dee later explained that she took the role because the script was captivating and she hoped it would help shift her public image, despite worrying the film might be a flop. However, she refused to perform a nude scene that was originally written for the movie's finale. During the 70s, Dee made occasional guest appearances on television shows such as Night Gallery, Fantasy Island, and Policewoman. Her final film role came in the low-budget drama Lost. Reflecting on her later years, Dee told a new paper that she sometimes felt like a has-been that never was, expressing the sense of unfulfilled potential that marked much of her post-stardom life. Later, but golden years. As Sandra moved away from the Hollywood spotlight, she encountered a series of health challenges that greatly affected her quality of life. One of the most significant problems she battled was osteoporosis. For those who might not know, osteoporosis is a condition that causes bones to become brittle and fragile, making even simple activities risky because of the chance of fractures. For Sandra, this meant that everyday tasks became more painful and difficult. Osteoporosis is often linked to aging, but Sandra's T-shirt struggles with it were compounded by her history of physical stress and health issues. Sandra's health wasn't just physical, though. She had a very public battle with addiction that had started in her younger years and continued to haunt her into adulthood. It was something she openly struggled with, and it sadly impacted both her personal and professional life. Addiction, coupled with health problems, took a toll on her emotionally. It wasn't easy for someone so young and bright to face these kinds of difficulties, especially when the world still remembered her as Hollywood's all-American sweetheart. After stepping back from acting, Sandra focused on her family life and tried to build a more private existence. She married musician Bobby Darin in the early 60s, and though their marriage eventually ended, their relationship was a significant chapter in both their lives. Sandra found comfort in her family and close friends who supported her through her ups and downs. She moved away from the Hollywood glare, preferring a quieter life that allowed her to heal and find peace away from the cameras. Unfortunately, Sandra's health continued to decline as she aged. The osteoporosis worsened, and she faced additional complications that made life increasingly difficult. In her final years, she struggled with kidney failure, a condition where the kidneys lose their ability to filter waste from the blood properly. Kidney failure is serious and can lead to a host of other health issues, which ultimately contributed to her passing. In 2005, Sandra Dee died at the age of 62. Though she left this world earlier than many would have hoped, her legacy remains strong. She is remembered not just for the roles she played, but for the warmth and sincerity she brought to the screen. Her story is a reminder of how fragile life can be, and how even the brightest stars can face deep struggles behind the scenes. Sandra Dee's life had its ups and downs, but she left a lasting impression on American culture. Her early films continue to be loved by new generations, and her story of resilience resonates with many. Though her later years were marked by illness and hardship, the charm and innocence she portrayed in her prime will always shine through. Thanks for watching until the end. We have similar great videos too, so make sure to subscribe to the channel.